moment the hostess looked me up and down and said, "Deliveries go around back," I almost laughed. Almost. I was standing at the entrance of Harlow's, the restaurant my brother had rented out for his wife's surprise birthday dinner, wearing a perfectly nice blazer and holding a gift bag from Nordstrom. The hostess, young, polished, very sure of herself, had genuinely mistaken me for a delivery driver. I didn't correct her right away. I just smiled and said I was a guest, and she gave me this look, the kind that says, "Sure you are," before reluctantly checking her list. My name was on it. Of course it was. My brother had called me 3 times that week to make sure I was coming. She showed me to the private dining room without another word, and I followed her through the restaurant I had quietly purchased 8 months ago. I should back up. My name is June, and I am 31 years old. I run a small hospitality investment group that my college roommate and I started out of her apartment in Charlotte 6 years ago with $40,000 and a lot of stubbornness. We now own 4 restaurant properties across the Southeast. Harlow's in Asheville was our most recent acquisition. A beautiful high-ceiling space in the River Arts District that had been struggling under previous ownership. We kept the name, kept most of the staff, and spent 4 months quietly renovating the kitchen and updating the menu. I say quietly because I tend to operate that way. My business partner Cecile handles most of the public-facing work. I handle the finances, the acquisitions, the behind-the-scenes decisions. Very few people outside my professional circle know what I actually do for a living. My family is not part of that circle. It's not that I'm ashamed of what I've built. It's that I got tired, years ago, of explaining myself to people who had already decided what I was. My older brother. I'll call him my brother because that's what he is. Spent the better part of my 20s introducing me to his friends as my little sister who does something with money. Always with a slight eye roll that suggested it wasn't quite a real job. His wife, Melissa, once asked me at Thanksgiving if I had considered getting my real estate license since I seemed interested in property. She meant it as a helpful suggestion. I am not bitter about this. I want to say that clearly. I love my brother. I even like Melissa mostly, but there is a particular kind of exhaustion that comes from being underestimated by the people who are supposed to know you best. And at some point I stopped correcting the record and just let them think whatever they wanted. So when my brother booked Harlow's for Melissa's birthday without knowing it was mine, I decided not to mention it. I was curious, honestly. I wanted to see the place in action from the guest side, wanted to see how the staff handled a private event, wanted to eat the food I'd been helping develop, without anyone treating me like the boss. What I did not anticipate was the boss's wife, Melissa's mother. I'll call her my mother-in-law adjacent, which is a mouthful, so let's just say her mother had flown in from Scottsdale for the occasion. Her name was Patricia, and she had the particular energy of a woman who had spent 60 years being the most important person in every room she entered. I had met her once before, at my brother and Melissa's wedding 4 years ago, where she had spent the reception asking me questions like, "And what does your little company do exactly?" with the tone of someone making polite conversation with a co-check girl. Patricia arrived at Harlow's 45 minutes before the rest of the guests and immediately began rearranging things. I know this because I arrived early too, old habit. I always scope a space before an event. And I watched from near the bar as Patricia moved centerpieces, questioned the server about the menu, sent back the bread basket because she'd heard somewhere that sourdough causes inflammation, and asked to speak to the manager twice in the span of 20 minutes. The manager on duty that night was a young man named Cody who had joined us from a hotel group in Charleston and was, by all accounts, excellent at his job. I watched him handle Patricia with the grace of someone diffusing a very polite bomb. She does this everywhere. My brother's childhood friend Garrett murmured, appearing beside me with a glass of sparkling water. He was one of the few guests already there. Last year, at the Hendersons' anniversary dinner, she sent the florist home and rearranged the whole table herself. "How'd that go?" I asked. "The florist cried," he said. "The flowers were actually better after," which somehow made it worse. I laughed, and we stood there companionably for a moment, watching Patricia interrogate a server about the provenance of the salmon. "Local," I heard him say. "Local from where?" she pressed. "Western North Carolina, about 40 miles east of here." She said, in the tone of someone who had expected a less satisfying answer and was disappointed by its absence. Melissa arrived at 7, genuinely surprised, genuinely delighted. She hugged everyone and teared up a little when she saw the room, which my brother had filled with photos from their life together. It was a good moment. Whatever complicated feelings I had about my family's dynamics, I wasn't immune to that. I found my seat and settled in, planning to have a quiet, pleasant evening. The first sign that this was not going to be a quiet, pleasant evening came about 20 minutes into dinner, when Patricia waved over our server, a college-age girl named Bree who had been nothing but professional all night, and announced that her entree was not what she'd ordered. I had seen Bree take the order. I had been sitting 2 seats away. Patricia had ordered the salmon. Patricia had received the salmon. I ordered the chicken, Patricia said with absolute certainty. I'm so sorry, let me check my notes, Bree said, and pulled out her order pad and showed Patricia exactly what she had written down. Patricia looked at it. Your handwriting is difficult to read, she said, as though this explained something, and slid the pad back across the table. Bree took the salmon back. She brought chicken. She did it without a single change in her expression, and I made a mental note to mention her to Cody, because that kind of professionalism deserves to be recognized. The second sign came when Patricia excused herself from the table and did not return for 15 minutes. I noticed because I was watching, which I know sounds strange, but I had slipped into a mode I recognized from site visits. Quiet, observational, taking everything in. When she came back, she seemed satisfied with herself in a way that made me uneasy. The third sign came when Cody appeared at my brother's elbow with an apologetic expression and quietly informed him that there had been a complication with the private dining arrangement. My brother looked confused. I excused myself from the table. I found Cody in the hallway outside the kitchen, holding a piece of paper with the careful expression of a man who had been handed something unpleasant and was trying to figure out the most professional way to deal with it. What is it? I asked. He hesitated, because from his perspective I was simply a dinner guest, and this was not my business. I'm the owner, I said quietly, of the restaurant. Cody, I know this is unusual. What's happening? He stared at me for 2 seconds, then he handed me the paper. It was a printed email which told me it had been prepared in advance from a catering company called Summit Event Services, claiming they had a signed contract to provide food and beverage service for this private event and demanding access to the kitchen. The email was addressed to the general manager of Harlow's. It had been sent 3 days ago. Did we receive this? I asked. Not that I know of. This is the first I'm seeing it. Where did you get it? Mrs. One of the guests brought it to me. Said she found it in her bag and thought it must have been mixed up with her things. I looked at the paper again. It was a forgery. I knew this immediately because I had personally negotiated every vendor contract for Harlow's, and Summit Event Services was not one of them. Beyond that, the formatting was slightly off. The logo resolution was poor, and the signature at the bottom was a scanned image you could find on any public document. Someone had printed a fake vendor contract and was planning to use it to bring in outside catering for this event, which, if successful, would have created enough confusion and chaos to potentially ruin the entire evening. I thought about Patricia's 15-minute absence. I thought about how pleased she'd looked coming back. Thank you, Cody, I said. Please continue with the original plan. Nothing changes. And if anyone approaches the kitchen claiming to be from Summit Event Services, you call me directly. He nodded, still slightly stunned. I went back to the dinner table. Melissa was telling a story about the first apartment she and my brother had shared, a studio in Raleigh where the heat didn't work properly and they'd spent the first winter sleeping in their coats. Everyone was laughing. My brother was looking at her the way he always did when she talked, like he was still a little surprised she was his. I picked up my fork and ate my dinner and waited. Patricia watched me across the table. I watched her back. She smiled first. I smiled second. We both knew something the rest of the table didn't, and she didn't know that I knew. And I was in no hurry to correct that. The food was excellent, by the way. The new chef we'd brought in from Atlanta had completely transformed the menu, and the braised short rib with sweet potato puree was exactly the kind of dish that makes people close their eyes after the first bite. 3 people at the table did exactly that. I counted. Around 8:30, a man in a catering jacket appeared at the entrance to the private dining room. Cody intercepted him before he made it 5 steps in. I excused myself again. In the hallway, the man from Summit Event Services, if that's what he actually represented, presented Cody with a physical copy of the same contract I'd already seen. He was polite, professional, and completely prepared to argue his way into our kitchen. I'm June, I said, stepping forward. I own this restaurant. He looked at me the way people look at me when I say that. The brief recalibration, the reassessment. We have a signed contract, he said. You have a document, I said. We have never had a conversation with Summit Event Services, and we have no record of this agreement in our system. If you believe there's been a legitimate misunderstanding, I'm happy to exchange contact information and sort this out tomorrow during business hours. Tonight, I need you to leave. He left. He wasn't happy about it, but he left. I stood in the hallway for a moment, breathing slowly, and then I took out my phone and sent a message to Cecile. We need to talk tomorrow. Someone tried to pull a vendor replacement scheme at Harlow's tonight. Fake contract, will explain. Her response came back in 40 seconds. Are you serious? Are you okay? I'm fine, I wrote. Eating short rib. It's incredible, by the way. Focus, she sent back, and by the way. Focus, she sent back, and I could hear her voice in it. I returned to the table as the birthday cake was being brought out. 3 tiers, almond and raspberry, with candles that took Melissa 2 tries to blow out. Everyone clapped. My brother kissed her on the cheek. Patricia applauded with the enthusiasm of someone performing applause. I sat down and waited for the cake to be served. So, Patricia said, to no one in particular but clearly to me, what is it you do again, June? I feel like I've never gotten a straight answer. The table shifted slightly. My brother started to say something, probably the something with money line, faithfully repeated. But I spoke first. I'm in hospitality investment, I said, primarily restaurant properties. How interesting, she said in the tone that means the opposite. So you work for a restaurant group? I run one, I said, my partner and I. We currently own 4 properties. A small silence. Oh, my brother said, this is one of them actually, I said, and gestured around the room in a way that I hoped was not too dramatic. We acquired Harlow's last year. I've been doing some menu development with the new chef. The short rib is his recipe. I told him it needed more time in the braise, and I think he was right to disagree with me. Another silence. Longer this time. You own this restaurant, my brother said. I do. You own the restaurant I booked for Melissa's birthday. You have excellent taste, I said. He laughed, and it was a real laugh, the surprised and slightly disbelieving kind. Garrett across the table raised his glass. Patricia was quiet, which, in my experience of Patricia, was unusual. I owe you an apology, my brother said more quietly. I've never actually asked you what you do. Not really. I've just assumed. You assumed something with money, I said. He winced. I said that out loud more than once, didn't I? A few times. Melissa reached across the table and took my hand. I had no idea, she said. This is your place. This whole night you gave us this. You gave yourselves this, I said. I just happen to be the one who owns the building. She laughed and squeezed my hand, and that was enough. That was actually more than enough. Later, after the cake, after the gifts, after most of the guests had filtered out into the cool Asheville evening, I found Patricia in the entry hall waiting for her car service. I want to be upfront with you, I said. I know about the catering company. She looked at me steadily. I don't know what you mean. You don't have to admit it, I said. But I want you to know that I know, because I think it's important that we're clear with each other. Whatever your reason was, whether you wanted to run the evening your way or whether something else was going on, it didn't work. And it won't work. This is my restaurant, and I run it the way I run it, and the staff here are good people who don't deserve to be put in the middle of family politics. She looked at me for a long time. Then she said, You're not what I expected. No, I said, I rarely am. Her car arrived. She left without another word. I can't tell you what she was thinking, and I won't pretend to know. Some people reckon with themselves privately, and some don't reckon at all, and I've learned I can't control which category someone falls into. I can only control what I say and how I say it. Cody found me near the bar as the last of the staff finished cleanup. You should know, he said, that whoever drafted that contract did their research. The logo, the formatting, it wasn't thrown together. I know, I said. The salmon lady planned this before she got here. I know that too. He shook his head with the expression of someone recalibrating their understanding of how strange an evening could get. Do you want me to file a report? We could. Not tonight, I said. Let's let everyone have the rest of the birthday. I'll talk to our attorney Monday morning. He nodded. Cody, I said, you and Bree both handled tonight beautifully. The whole team did. Bree's going to be mortified when I tell her you own the place, he said. Don't tell her yet, I said. Let her just be proud of herself for a few days first. My brother texted me that night after he'd gotten Melissa home. I'm sorry I never paid attention, he wrote. That's not a great excuse. I just always assumed you were figuring things out and I was the one who had it together. Which is a really embarrassing thing to have believed. I looked at the text for a while. You do have it together, I wrote back. The way you looked at her tonight when she was blowing out the candles, you have exactly what matters. You have exactly what matters. I've just been building something different. Can I come see the restaurant sometime? Like actually see it? Have you show me around? Yes, I wrote. I'll introduce you to the chef. Fair warning. He's going to make you try 8 things and ask you to rank them and then tell you that your rankings are wrong. I look forward to it, he wrote. I set my phone down on the bar and looked around the dining room, empty now. Chairs tucked in, candles out. The faint smell of almond cake still hanging in the air. The renovation had taken us 4 months and more late nights than I could count. I picked out those light fixtures myself. Spent 2 weekends arguing with the contractor about the plank width on the floors. I'd eaten more test menu dishes in this kitchen than I could remember, sitting at the prep counter with a notepad while the chef tried things and I tried to articulate what I was tasting. It wasn't a perfect evening. Patricia was probably composing her own version of events in the back of her car service to the hotel. The catering situation would need to be handled properly and carefully. There were things my brother and I hadn't said yet that probably needed saying. But the food had been good. The staff had been better. The woman I'd watched blow out her birthday candles had cried happy tears, and the man she married had looked at her like she was something worth protecting. And the leftover short rib, or 12 portions of it, went home with the kitchen staff who'd worked the event. Because that's what you do with good food at the end of a good night. Nothing went to waste except Patricia's plan. And honestly, she hadn't had much of a plan to begin with. I keep thinking about Patricia's face when I told her I knew about the catering company. Not the moment at the dinner table when I revealed I owned Harlow's. That one had witnesses, and people tend to compose themselves when there's an audience. I mean the quiet moment in the entry hall, just the 2 of us. When I said it plainly and watched her decide what kind of person she was going to be in response, she chose denial. And then, for just a second before her car arrived, something else flickered across her face. I don't know what to call it. Recognition, maybe. The particular discomfort of being seen clearly by someone you had already dismissed. I've thought a lot about why she did what she did. The fake contract, the printed email, the vendor she'd arranged to show up and create chaos. All of it planned before she even boarded her flight from Scottsdale. She came prepared to control an evening that wasn't hers to control. And the thing is, I don't think it was really about the food or the flowers or the seating arrangement. It was about power. About needing to be the person in the room who decides how things go. When you've spent a long time believing that's your role, you'll go to strange lengths to protect it. Even when protecting it no logical sense. Even when it risks the very evening you're supposedly there to celebrate. I recognize something in that, honestly. Not the manipulation. I hope I'm not capable of that. But the fear underneath it. The fear of being irrelevant. Of walking into a room and mattering less than you expected. I felt that fear. I just dealt with it differently. What I learned in the years of building something from almost nothing is that the only way through that fear is to keep your head down and do the work anyway. Not because someone is watching. Not because you'll eventually get credit. Just because the work is worth doing and you are capable of doing it. That discipline, The kind that doesn't require an audience is the thing that actually builds a life. It's quiet and unglamorous, and my brother didn't know about it for years, and that was fine. I knew. Integrity works the same way. Bree, our server that night, had every reason to argue with Patricia when Patricia insisted she'd ordered chicken. She had the notes. She had the proof. She showed it calmly, and then she let it go and brought the chicken anyway. Because her job was to give the guest a good evening, not to win an argument. Nobody at that table was going to remember that moment except me. I remembered it because it told me everything I needed to know about who she was when things got difficult. That's the kind of person I want working in my restaurants. That's the kind of person I want to be. My brother texted me the night of the party and apologized for years of not paying attention. I told him it was okay, and I meant it, but I also think there's something worth sitting with in how it happened. He didn't start paying attention because I demanded it. He started paying attention because I built something real, and eventually reality introduced itself. You can't fake your way to that. You can't shortcut it. You just have to keep building, keep showing up, keep doing the thing with your whole self, and trust that eventually the room figures out who was worth knowing all along. Patricia's plan failed not because I outmaneuvered her, but because there was nothing to outmaneuver. There was just a restaurant that ran well because good people worked there. There was just an evening that held together because it was built on something solid. The leftover short rib went home with the kitchen staff. That felt right to me. It still does.